The animation we just watched presents some concept of community-based MHPSS and two operational models. You maybe thought it was too rich and there was too much information to retain, but you don't have to worry because we will now go back to the main themes one by one. The concept of community was central to the video, but how then do we define community? Community refers to a system whose members share certain commonalities, such as geographical location or location of perceived origin, language, interest, beliefs, values, political affiliations, ethnic or cultural identities or sense of belonging, and whose size varies from very small to extremely large. Members are individuals grouped in families, tribes or clans, youth or professional associations, sports teams, artistic or interest groups, and institutions, such as political bodies, schools, health centers, and religious and civil society organizations. And all these constantly interrelate and interact. The interrelationships and interactions between individual and these groups are also informed by cultures, belief systems, history, socio-political interest, and collective narratives. It is important to understand that communities are dynamic and changing, and, like all systems, need both a degree of stability and a degree of change in order to survive and thrive. In emergency migration, the balance between stability and change may be disrupted. Too much and sudden change occurs. Otherwise, communities create a sense of belonging and safety and are central in defining identity, which in turn is a cornerstone of psychosocial well-being and is central to understanding the psychosocial needs and resources of crisis-affected and migrant populations. As we saw in the video, identity, both individual and collective, is a system of three interrelated components. The first component is the self-concept, which corresponds more or less to who a person is to themselves. The second is the interiorized societal context, in which one internalizes social factors such as gender, sexuality, race, culture, and other learned social roles. Lastly, identity is also made by how one is perceived by others, such as family, friends, colleagues, or neighbors. These three components are in constant relation to one another, a relation that is in a continuous evolution. In crisis and migration, the self-concept, however, can be called into question when one experiences violence or neglect. One's interiorized societal factors may be challenged when the need to assimilate into a new culture arises. And how one is perceived in their environment can drastically change as migrants and those displaced are often stigmatized. Identities, therefore, need to be readapted. This process might be painful and challenging, but its outcomes are not necessarily negative. In the process, however, confusion, disorientation, and polarization can happen. A community-based approach to MHPSS stems from respecting communities' identities and from the awareness that humanitarian interventions are part of a system that contribute in itself to determining the evolution of some of these identities. In the video, what culture consists of and its protective and restorative functions were quite well explained. We need to add here that culture cannot be understood as a closed system, and cultures are made up of subcultures. Usually, cultural and subcultural elements will both coexist in the same individuals and groups. As migrant and host communities' cultures interact, subcultures can also form positive alliances between people of different communities, of the two communities, of the migrant and host communities, who might gather around a set of common subcultural values, like language, myth, icons, cultural symbols, and so on. We will go over the ways culture impacts community-based MHPSS work in the course and with particular focus in Module 3. For the time being, it is important to keep in mind how much culture is part of a community-based approach and of mental well-being.